all of you have Bibles in your hands? Children, do you have your
小
Bibles?
朋友有冇聖經喺你手啊？
You need a Bible?
快啲攞翻自己本聖經出嚟先。
Adults, have you got your Bibles?
大人咧，大人都要攞你本聖經嘅喎。
Where is mine?
How many of you kids have known a bully?
問下啲小朋友，
You know what a bully is?
你知唔知乜嘢叫做
Oh.
有人蝦
Do
你
you
啊？
ever see a bully in school?
你有冇試過見到有人蝦另外一個人咧？
Okay.
即係有，你係咪你啊？係咪自己？
Okay. Now, let me ask you another question. Have any of you ever been a bully?
你哋有冇試過俾人蝦先？
When I was small, maybe.
When you were small?
When I was
哦，你有
small.
冇蝦過
No,
人？
I
唔好意
was.
思啊。
I hope. I guess.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Wow, okay. So the rest of you have never been a bully?
你
Okay.
哋冇做過惡霸去蝦人啊？係咪啊？
Have you been the victim of a bully? A bully was trying to do things to you?
咁你有冇試過有人實有人試過想蝦你，但係咧你就冇俾人蝦到喎。
So we've
跟住
got
阿
at least,
Rafael 就話佢試過。
we've got at least 3 people here or 4 that have been a victim of bullies. Somebody tried to bully you, okay?
咁啊，哦，我哋知道有啲小朋友咧，佢都俾人蝦過喎。
Okay. Now, have you ever seen somebody over here bullying somebody but not you and you were just watching?
咁你有冇試過見到有人俾人蝦，但係你就企喺度睇，或者你喺側邊睇住咧？
Now, what did you do?
咁你點做啊？
Did you help the person who was being bullied, the victim?
你有幫佢係咪？
No.
你有幫個受害者係咪？
We have to read it.
Did you help the bully?
定係你幫人哋去蝦第二個咧？
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, there's just all kinds of different ways we can think about a bully, huh?
咁啊，一諗起咧欺凌咧呢一樣嘢咧，其實有好多嘢我哋都可以思考嘅。叫佢唔好
Okay.
打啊！
Now, there can be some very common reasons why somebody becomes a bully.
哦，其實咧一個人咧會去蝦第二個人咧，可能係有啲原因嘅喎。
There may be other reasons why somebody is a victim of bullies, why someone is made fun of.
又或者咧，如果有人去俾人蝦啊、俾人笑啊，可能佢自己都係有啲原因令到呢件事發生喎。
Okay. Now, you know, one of the things that I've seen is that sometimes people laugh at or make fun of or bully kids that maybe have some kind of a handicap. In other words, they have some kind of a problem and they're not quite able to respond in the way that everybody else would.
哦，你知唔知點解一個人咧會去蝦另外一個人啊？咁其實咧可能有一個原因咧，就係佢自己嗰個，佢可能咧嗰個性格咧，自己個性格係有啲問題咧，佢改變唔到喎，所以咧佢就走去蝦人啦。
Now, bullying is a way of treating somebody in the wrong way.
咩叫做蝦另外一個人啊？咩叫欺凌啊？就係咧唔係好好咁樣對待另外一個人啊。
It treats them without respect. It doesn't show them the respect that we should.
即係話咧，譬如唔尊重另外一個人啊。
Okay. And you know what? It can happen any place.
哦，呢一件事咧，譬如欺凌呢一樣嘢咧，可以喺任何地方發生嘅。
Now, how many of you see it happen in school?
有冇人見過喺學校發生？
Okay. A lot of times it happens in school, right?
好多時候喺學校會發生呢一樣嘢。
Does it ever happen in church?
咁喺教會有冇試過啊？哇！我真大隻啊！
Does it ever happen in your home?
喺屋企有冇試過啊？
Okay. So Raphael, does Vicente ever try to bully you at home? Maybe we shouldn't ask that question. Sometimes older brothers and sisters.
有陣時兄弟姊妹之間咧，即係或者係哥哥蝦，或者哥哥家姐蝦弟弟妹妹咁樣喎。
So Vicente, does Raphael ever try to bully you? No. Okay.
And my brothers and sisters, they pretend that they try to bully you.
Pretend. 玩就會咯，咪真係。
You know, sometimes it can happen when somebody is on the job, when somebody's working.
He loves me all the time.
Rafael said his cousin never bullies him. He treats him nice and loves him very much.
That's great. That is the answer to bullying, huh? If we love people, then we don't have to bully them.
係啦，如果我哋係愛其他人嘅話，我哋愛嗰個人咧，我哋就唔會去蝦佢啦。
Okay, now, when we think about bullies, what do we think about?
我哋諗起欺凌咧，諗起蝦一個人蝦另外一個人咧，我哋諗起啲乜嘢啊？
Okay, maybe it's somebody comes up to you and says, okay, you gotta do this.
係咪捉住一個人就話你一定要咁樣做，你一定要咁樣做，係咪咁樣？或者係佢好似想打佢咁樣？
You know, maybe it's not an action, but maybe it's.
哦，蝦另外一個人咧，唔一定係要用動作嘅，唔係一定用身體語言嘅，可能咧用説話。
Maybe it's somebody calling you names.
可能有啲人笑你啦，起花名啦。
Maybe it's someone saying, well, if you don't come play with me, I'm not going to be your friend.
哦，又或者咧係有人話如果你唔係complete。
If you don't come play with me.
哦，如果你唔係同我一齊咧，我就要蝦你啦咁樣。
Does anybody? Okay, Ryan.
I read a book of a bully saying, "Give me $1 or I'll spit on you."
哇！咩書嚟㗎呢個本？
So it can happen a lot of ways, huh?
咁啊，其實咧欺凌咧呢一樣嘢可以用唔同嘅形式發生嘅喎。
So it might be words that you say.
可能咧係藉住講説話啦，去蝦一個人啦。
It might be something that you do.
又或者去做一啲嘢去蝦一個人啦。
But it hurts the other person.
但係如果我哋咁樣做、咁樣講嘅時候，我哋會傷害到另外一個人嘅。
Okay. It might be that the person who is the bully is someone that's bigger and stronger.
可能咧蝦人哋嗰個咧係大隻啲、高大啲。
You know why some of those people do that?
No.
Because they know that you're just a little guy and you're not as strong as they are, so therefore they're going to make you do what they want because you can't stop them,
咁
right?
點解佢哋要咁樣去蝦另外啲人咧？因為佢知道咧俾佢蝦嘅人係弱小啲。
And spit up your face.
Okay.
What's going on?
Now, bullying is trying to make somebody do what they want you to do, but maybe you don't want to do.
欺凌係啲乜嘢啊？欺凌咧就係俾人蝦，就係佢係想用辦法去令到另外一個人咧去做自己想佢做嘅事。
Maybe it's to do something wrong.
可能咧係做一啲壞事，做一啲唔好嘅嘢喎。
But you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that.
你唔想咁樣做嘅。
But they say, you don't do that, I won't be your friend.
咁可能，但係對方話嚇你唔咁樣做，我就唔同你做朋友。
Or they say, you don't do that and I'm going to hit you.
又或者係你如果唔係咁樣做咧，我就會打你。
Or you don't do that, then I'm going to tell somebody else what you did to me.
哦，又或者係話如果你唔係照我講咁樣做咧，我就話俾人哋聽你做嗰啲咁樣嘅事，或者你咁樣對我。
Okay? But a bully is someone who doesn't practice self-control. They're just trying to use anything to get the other person to do what they want.
乜嘢係欺凌啊？點解嗰個人會蝦另外一個人啊？因為咧自己冇一個自制能力，唔可以控制到自己喎。所以咧就逼另外一個人咧去做佢自己想去做嘅事。
Now, can you think of any bullies in the Bible?
你喺聖經裏邊諗唔諗到有啲咩故事，有咩例子咧係關於欺凌㗎？
Ryan?
聖經故事啊。
係啊，
Satan.
撒旦。
That's a good answer. I didn't even think about him.
好答案。
我耶穌死咗，我釘十字架嗰陣，
Okay.
係啊，俾人蝦。
Okay,
係打耶穌。
係咯，係咯，講得好啊！
做釘耶穌。
Okay, who was that? You forgot the name. Okay, but there was someone that you're thinking about a story there, huh?
Howard.
Because Jesus starts some guys with
Okay.
The guy, the bad guys who put the bad guys who put the guy on the road, like in the Good Samaritan.
The bad guys who put
The Good Samaritan.
the Good Samaritan on
Those
the road.
bad guys
Okay.
who
Maybe how about the guys that tried to that had Daniel put in the lion's den?
又會唔會係將阿但以利掉落去獅子坑嗰個都係一個欺凌咧？
They were trying to bully him so that he would not pray.
係啦，佢
Joseph's brothers?
約瑟嘅
Okay.
哥哥啦。
Okay. There was one, yeah.
Joseph brothers put them in the car and then he snapped them down the road.
Okay. Saul. Okay. Saul was there to kill. He killed Stephen. Okay. And in a lot of other ways, he was trying to harm the Christians.
譬如喺新約聖經啦，司提反咧佢俾人用石頭掟死啦。掃羅咧就即係保羅，佢就係去逼迫啲基督徒。
Now, I want for us to think about 3 Bible examples of people who could have been bullies but weren't.
咁咧想你諗下咧，喺聖經裏邊咧有3個例子咧，就係有一啲人咧，佢哋可以去蝦另外一個人，但係佢哋冇喎。
如果人哋可能有嗰啲毒啊，擺入個靈會嗰啲食咗。
喺聖經裏邊，我哋而家講緊有一啲人可以去。
我聽到有隻蛇，就唔知咩，有個男人唔知蛇。佢生瘡。
Okay. So, 3 people that could have been but weren't.
喺聖經裏邊有3個人，佢哋可以去蝦人。
One boy was giving all the sheep and the other one was giving the baby. But the girl wasn't happy with the one who because it was like all the other the one who gave the sheep was like and then the other one gave the baby. So
Okay.
係啊，佢係講緊該隱同亞伯嘅故事。 係啦。
Okay. Now I want for us to think about one in the Old Testament. Okay. Two in the New Testament.
喺舊約聖經咧有兩個例子啦，新約聖經有一個例子，就係嗰個人咧佢有能力可以去蝦另外一個人，但係佢冇咁樣做
Now
喎。
the first one then, okay. First one that I want us to think about is Solomon.
第一個咧，我哋想你諗下係所羅門。
Wow. Solomon had power. He had money. He had everything.
所羅門王咧，佢係王嚟噶嘛，佢有錢啦，有權力啦，佢要乜有乜喎。
He had the opportunity that he could have done anything he wanted to do.
佢咧可以佢咧其實佢想做啲乜嘢咧都可以做到嘅。
Now, Solomon wrote a book in the Old Testament called Ecclesiastes.
但係咧，所羅門王咧就喺舊約聖經咧就寫咗一本書叫做傳道書。
And in that book, he talked about his education, he talked about his power, he talked about the people around him, and he said all of these things were just nothing.
咁咧喺傳道書咧所羅門王咧佢提到自己嘅智慧啦，即係佢讀佢識嘅嘢好多，佢又講到一啲權力嘅嘢啦，佢又講到佢身邊嘅人喎，但係佢話咧呢啲一切嘅嘢咧都係虛空啊，都係冇嘢㗎。
Now, I want you to see what Solomon said in chapter 12 and in a few verses in chapter 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 12.
我哋一齊睇下傳道書第12章。
And so, first of all, in chapter 12 and verse 1, he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth.
喺傳道書第12章第1節咧，就係講到話，你要喺你年青嘅時候，就要去紀念做你嘅上帝，做你嘅主。
And so what he's saying here is, don't just think about how you can control or treat somebody else, but think about God and what God wants you to do.
呢句説話嘅意思係乜嘢啊？呢句説話嘅意思咧？呢句説話嘅意思咧，就係咧，你喺你年青嘅時候，你喺你年紀細嘅時候咧，唔好去用你嘅權力用你嘅能力咧去控制其他人啊，反而咧要去記住咧你嘅上帝。
Now, look at it in verse 9.
睇下第9節。
Was a very wise man.
所羅門王咧係一個好聰明、好有智慧嘅人嚟喎。
We can say that he was a very intellectual man, a very smart man.
我哋可以話佢係一個好聰明啦、好有知識嘅人。
But I want you to think about something. Does being smarter make you better than somebody else?
但係想小朋友諗下啦，就係如果你係聰明過其他人嘅，係咪就代表你係好過其他人呢？
Does being smarter than somebody else mean that you can treat somebody else with disrespect?
係咪即係話，如果你係聰明過其他人嘅，你就可以唔尊重其他人呢？
Just because you know 3 different languages and somebody else only knows 1, does that mean you have the right to bully them or that you're smarter than them or you're better than they are?
係咪因為咧你識嘅語言咧比其他人多啦，咁就代表你聰明啲、你好啲、你叻啲咧？
Now, I think most of you kids know at least 2 languages, and some of you know 3 languages. And 4.
I know 7.
You know more than Ryan. You're smarter than him, huh?
No, she knows like 2 words from like each.
Okay,
then if you counted that, I know 12.
Okay.
咁咧我哋呢度在座嘅小朋友咧，佢哋都係識得多啲嘅語言啦。
Now, if I only know 1 word of a language, does that mean I know that many different languages?
In that case, I know.
Oh, okay. Well, not quite. But, this is really important because I want you to understand something here. Just being smart in a worldly way does not mean that you are wise. And it doesn't mean that you're better than somebody else. And it doesn't mean you can bully somebody else because you're better than they are because you know more languages.
咁咧，我哋咧唔可以因為自己識嘅嘢去比人多咧，我哋就可以去蝦另外一個人，又或者咧以為自己係好過其他人喎。因為咧喺呢個世界上認為聰明嘅嘢咧，即係唔代表咧係喺聖經裏邊係有智慧嘅喎。
You know, there are some people that don't even know one language well.
你知唔知啊？有啲人咧，佢連自己嗰個語言都唔係好叻嘅用得。
Sometimes I write something in English and I read it the second time and I thought, wow, how could I write that? How could I make so many mistakes?
就例如阿 Ken 話，佢就算有陣時寫英文，佢再睇翻嘅時候，點解我會寫得咁差㗎咁樣？
Okay, now let's see what Solomon says.
我哋一齊睇下所羅門點講。
Okay, Ecclesiastes 12 and starting with verse 9.
傳道書第12章第9節。
Now, here he calls himself the teacher.
呢度咧，所羅門咧，佢稱呼自己為老師。
Let me ask you a question before we read this. Have any of you ever felt like you're smarter than your teacher?
我想問下小朋友，有冇時候你覺得自己係叻過自己嘅老師嘅咧？
Me and Ryan and Scott and Okay. Does that give you the reason, the excuse for bullying your teacher?
咁係咪代表你就可以蝦你嘅老師咧？
Have you ever seen any students bullying the teacher?
你哋有冇見過學生蝦老師啊？
I saw that too when I was in school. Okay, but you know what? You know what? We had one teacher and nobody would laugh at them or make fun of them, of that teacher.
咁咧，阿 Ken 話咧，我哋有一位老師咧，就係冇人咧會去笑佢，會去蝦佢嘅。
He respected the students and he expected the students to respect him too.
咁咧，呢個老師咧好尊重佢嘅學生啦，亦都希望佢嘅學生咧都係咁樣尊重佢嘅。
Okay, now let's see what Solomon says. Not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people.
呢個第9節話咧，呢個老師咧，唔單止係有智慧嘅，仲係有好多嘅知識咧可以去教人哋嘅喎。
He was smart.
佢好聰明
but he was also wise.
佢唔單止聰明，佢亦都有智慧。
Some people are smart, but they're not wise.
你小朋友要搞清楚喎，聰明咧唔一定係有智慧嘅喎。
And do you know what else?
仲有咧，
Some people are not smart, but they are wise.
有啲人咧，即使佢係唔聰明，但係佢係有智慧嘅。
Betsy did not have a lot of intellectual knowledge, but Betsy was a wise person in understanding people.
我哋所認識嘅嗰位 Betsy 啦，咁佢咧未必有好豐富嘅知識喺佢頭腦裏邊，佢未必係一個好聰明嘅人，但係佢絕對係一個咧有智慧嘅人喎。
Now, let's read more about the teacher here in verse 9. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs.
呢個老師點樣啊？喺第9節，佢咧就默想啦，跟住又考察啦，然後咧佢講咗好多好多嘅箴言喎，即係講咗好多有智慧嘅説話喎。
He was smart and he was wise and he knew how to understand things and to express them in a very good way.
呢個老師咧，佢唔單止聰明啦，有智慧喎，佢仲係能夠明白啲事情啦，去亦都能夠咧係用好好嘅辦法咧去表達出嚟，去教其他人啊。
Verse 10 says the teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true.
喺第10節咧講到呢個老師咧，佢用最適合嘅言去 佢用最適合嘅文字咧，或者用最適合嘅表達方式咧，去憑正直咧去寫一啲誠實嘅説話出嚟。
But a bully does not necessarily use the truth, and he does not necessarily use what is upright or good, right.
一個咧欺凌別人嘅人咧，佢哋唔一定會講真話，亦都唔一定咧係一個正直嘅人。
Now, notice in verse 12 then what the teacher said.
第12節咧，呢個老師咧點講啊？
Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them, of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body.
呢個老師咧佢就話啦，仲有一樣嘢咧你要知道啦，就係咧有好多書啦，你睇都睇唔晒嘅，你就算睇得晒咧，你個身體咧都會疲倦嘅喎。
You might be super smart.
你可以係非常聰明，知道好多嘢。
But what does it mean?
咁即係乜嘢啊？
It means you just wear yourself out.
咁其實你學咁多嘢咧，其實係令到你攰啦。
What's the purpose of it is the idea that he's saying.
喺呢一度咧，個老師話你學咁多呢啲嘢嚟有咩用咧？
Now, look at verse 13.
第13節。
Now, all has been said, and here is the conclusion of the matter.
咁咧講咗咁多嘢啦，個老師咧喺第13節咧想做一個總結。
Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man.
呢個老師就話啦，要敬畏上帝，遵守上帝嘅命令。呢一個咧就係所有人咧要盡嘅本分。
Wow, fear God.
敬畏神啊！去對上帝咧有一種尊敬，有一種害怕。
Do you know why a bully has such power to control others?
你知唔知點解一個人係可以欺凌另外一個人咧？真係可以做到咧？點解咧？
Because he's not afraid, or she is not afraid, and she or he thinks he can do anything that he wants to, and nothing will happen to him.
點解佢可以去蝦另外一個人啊？因為佢唔驚咯，佢覺得自己可以咩都做到咯。
Bullies, you know what? There's somebody you need to be afraid of.
咁咧，其實咧嗰啲蝦人哋嘅人咧，佢哋唔可以咩都唔驚㗎。有一位咧，佢係要驚嘅，
And that is God.
就係上帝啦。
Someday
有一日，
you will answer to God.
上帝咧就會問你，你就要答佢嘅喎。
There's going to be a lot of people that do not respect you because you're a bully.
咁咧，你咧如果走去蝦其他人咧，其他人係唔會尊重你㗎。
And Solomon understood that.
所羅門王咧去明白呢一件事。
Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man.
呢度咧，所羅門話你要去敬畏上帝，去遵守咧上帝嘅命令喎，因為呢啲咧都係人每一個人咧要盡嘅本分嚟嘅。
For God will bring every deed of the bully, every deed of every one of us into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil.
喺第14節啊，呢度話咧，上帝咧會去問每一個人咧每一件事喎，無論嗰件事係好嘅，係唔好嘅，係隱藏嘅，神咧都要審問。
Solomon had power.
所羅門王咧有權力。
There were times he made judgments.
佢可以係去做一個審判者、審判官。
There were times he had to discipline.
佢亦都係有管教嘅時候。
But he was not a bully because he was humble, and he understood that he was underneath God, and he had to be God's person in the lives of others.
佢既然係一個審判者，亦都可以咧去實施一啲管教喎，但係佢咧就冇去蝦其他人，冇去欺凌其他人，因為咧佢知道喺佢上邊咧仲有上帝啦，佢要去謙卑啦。
Now, let's think about another could have been bullied but wasn't person in the New Testament.
我哋一齊睇下咧，喺新約聖經有另外一個人，佢係可以去蝦其他人，但係佢冇過。
Now, Ryan mentioned that one of those New Testament bullies was Saul.
Ryan 提到咧，喺新約聖經，掃羅咧係一個欺凌人嘅人嚟嘅。
Do you think that a bully could ever change?
一個咧欺凌人嘅人咧，佢可唔可以改變咧？
So who was one of the New Testament could have been but wasn't bullies?
咁喺新約聖經裏邊咧，有邊一個咧佢係有能力去蝦另外一啲人嘅，但係佢冇咁樣做。
Not Saul,
唔係掃羅，
but Paul.
保羅。
Okay.
即係咧已經係信咗上帝嘅掃羅啦，咁啊，佢就改咗名做保羅。
Paul was a bully at one time, but he changed.
保羅咧以前咧就係欺凌人嘅，佢咧專去蝦啲基督徒嘅，後尾咧佢就改變啦。
And I want you to look at Philippians chapter 3.
我哋一齊睇下腓立比書第3章。
Because Paul, I'm not saying Saul, Paul had all of the qualifications to be a bully.
保羅咧佢即係信咗主嘅保羅啦，咁佢係有好多特質咧，或者佢有一啲身份咧，佢係可以去蝦其他人嘅。
So, look at Philippians chapter 3. And we're going to read verses 4 to 6. Though I myself have reason for such confidence, if anyone else thinks he has reasons to put confidence in the flesh, I have more.
保羅話喎，其實我都可以靠住肉體㗎。如果有啲人諗自己可以靠住肉體嘅，我就更加可以啦。
Circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews in regard to the law, a Pharisee.
第5節，我第8日受割禮，我係以色列族便雅憫支派嘅，係希伯來人所生嘅希伯來人。
As for zeal, persecuting the church. As for legalistic righteousness, faultless. 就律法嚟講咧，我係法利賽人；就熱心嚟講咧，我係逼迫教會嘅；就律法上面嚟講咧，我係無可指責嘅。In Paul's eyes, he could have seen himself as perfect. 因為保羅佢咁樣嘅身份咧，佢可以喺自己嘅眼中咧，佢係完美嘅，佢係完全冇錯嘅。He had the position. 因為咧佢有嗰個地位。He had the power. 佢有嗰個權力。He had the nationality that was number one. 佢嗰個國籍咧，佢希伯來人嘅裏邊嘅希伯來人喎，佢係法利賽人嚟嘅。Why he was in a position that he could just look down on anybody and everybody and just kind of ignore them or just abuse them or whatever he wanted to. 佢有呢個咁樣嘅身份咧，令到佢其實可以咧去睇低身邊任何一個人嘅。But let's keep reading in verse 7. And see how Paul looked at himself and all of those things. 但係喺第7節，我哋睇下保羅佢點樣去睇佢自己啦。But whatever was to my profit, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. 喺第7節咧，保羅話啦，但係呢啲咧係我之前以為對我有益嘅事咧，我而家因為基督嘅緣故，我都當作呢啲事咧係唔好嘅。Everything that Paul thought was his strength, that made him better than somebody else, he said, it's nothing. 保羅佢有呢個身份，有呢一個權力，呢一啲睇起上嚟係好似好過其他人嘅嘢嚟嘅。咁但係咧，保羅話因為基督嘅緣故，佢覺得呢啲全部都係冇嘢啊，都係唔當係一回事嚟嘅。So why wasn't Paul a bully?
點解保羅唔係一個會覺得自己比人好，會去蝦另外一個人嘅人呢？
Because he was living totally for Jesus, not for his own desires.
因為保羅佢係為耶穌而活嘅，佢唔係咧為咗自己，唔係按住自己想點就點喎。
He let Jesus take charge of his goals and the things that he wanted.
佢咧讓耶穌咧成為佢嘅目標啦，佢個目標就係關於耶穌嘅。
Okay? Paul did not need to control anybody else.
保羅咧佢係唔需要咧去控制其他人啊。
He was totally surrendered to what was God's will, not his own.
佢咧完全咧係按照上帝想佢點樣生活咧，佢就點樣生活啦。佢唔係按照住自己個想法。
And Paul said his purpose was not to tear people down, but to build them up.
保羅咧就係佢唔係要去摧毀其他人喎，唔係去破壞其他人，而係咧去建立其他人，去幫助其他人。
Not to harm people, but to help them.
唔係去傷害人啊，而係去幫助人。
Now, what does a bully want to do?
一個欺凌人嘅人咧，一個惡霸啦，佢想做啲乜嘢啊？
He wants people to help him.
佢想人哋個個係幫佢啫嘛，去做佢想做嘅嘢啫嘛。
He wants everybody to do what he wants.
佢想其他人咧做佢自己想做嘅嘢。
He's not willing to humble himself to strengthen and help others.
呢啲惡霸咧，佢係唔願意咧去謙卑自己咧去幫其他人嘅喎。
Now, you know, we talked about Solomon.
我哋講
He was a king.
我哋講到所羅門啦，佢係皇帝啦。
And in the religious and political world of his time, Paul was right there at the top.
我哋又提到保羅啦，保羅佢嘅身份啊，佢嘅佢絕對可以做一個宗教嘅領袖啦。
But you know what? There was somebody else that could have even been a bigger bully than either Paul or Solomon.
你知唔知有一個人佢可以去做一個大惡霸喎，係叻過所羅門王同埋保羅嘅。
Wow, who was that?
邊個啊？佢係
Who could have been a bigger bullier than even Solomon or Paul? Yes, Jesus.
Oh, 40.
Jesus could have even been a bigger bully.
耶穌咧，佢可以有能力咧去做一個大惡霸嘅。
Now,
係啊，
again, I want you to think about Philippians chapter 2.
我哋一齊睇下腓立比書第2章。
Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 and 7.
第6、第7節。
In fact, we'll look at verses 6, 7, and 8. Philippians 2, 6, 7, and 8. It says, it's talking about Jesus, who being in the image and nature of God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped.
第6節咧，呢度講到上帝耶穌咧，佢本身係上帝嚟噶嘛，但係咧佢唔會去因為呢一樣嘢咧去做一個藉口或者做，佢唔會去恃住呢一樣嘢。
Now, what does that mean? Who was Jesus? It means Jesus was God.
耶穌係上帝嚟噶嘛？
That's what verse 6 means.
係啦，第6節咧就話俾我聽，耶穌係上帝嚟嘅。
And what does verse 7 say?
第7節點講啊？
But made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness.
喺第7節咧，佢話耶穌咧，佢反而就算佢係上帝嚟嘅，佢咧都係謙卑自己啦，去成為奴僕咁樣喎，成為人嘅樣式
He
啦。
was God, but he became like us.
耶穌咧係上帝，但係咧佢願意謙卑自己咧，成為我哋咁樣嘅樣式。
How many bullies are willing to become like the person that they are abusing, that they're hurting?
咁有幾多惡霸咧係願意咧自己去成為咧俾自己蝦嗰個人咁嘅樣咧？
Jesus could have been the biggest bully there ever was, but he became like one who would be bullied.
耶穌咧佢本來因為佢係上帝嚟㗎嘛，佢絕對有能力去做一個大惡霸去蝦所有人啦，但係佢冇咁樣做喎，佢反而咧成為我哋咁樣嘅樣，成為人啊。
He did not ask people to do things for him. He was there to do things for people and to help them.
耶穌咧冇叫人咧，冇逼人哋去做佢想做嘅事喎，反而咧耶穌嚟到咧就去幫助其他人啊。
In fact, one time many of the disciples were turning away from Jesus, and he turned to his 12 and he said, "Do you want to leave too? You can leave if you want. I'm not going to bully you. I'm not going to try to control you."
咁咧有一次咧，咁耶穌嘅12個門徒咧都想離開喎，咁耶穌就同佢哋講話：如果你哋係想離開嘅，你哋就離開啦，我係唔會去蝦你哋嘅，我係唔會逼你嘅。
Okay, so what does all this mean for us now today?
好啦，今日咧對我哋嚟講呢一樣嘢咧有咩意思咧
Okay, we don't want to be a bully, do we? Okay, we want to follow Solomon and Paul and Jesus' examples.
就係咧，我哋咧唔願意咧，我哋就唔想自己咧成為一個惡霸噶嘛，我哋想去學習所羅門同埋保羅嘅。
Okay, so if it's not neat to be a bully, okay, how are we going to respond if we see that kind of a situation?
既然咧做惡霸係唔好噶啦，咁我哋如果見到或者遇到有呢啲情況嘅時候，我哋可以點做咧？
Okay, so maybe somebody says, if you don't do this, I'm not going to be your friend.
如果有人話，如果你唔係咁樣做嘅話，我就唔同你做朋友。
So what do you say?
咁你會點講啊？
Say, okay, if you don't want me to be your friend, that's all right, but you're still my friend.
你可以
But
話
I'm not going to do what you say, but you're still my friend.
你可以話咧，你要我做呢一啲嘢，我係唔會做嘅。就算你唔同我做朋友咧，我都可以同你做朋友嘅，你都係我嘅朋友嚟嘅。
Okay. We have to do something different than what the bully is doing.
我哋咧唔好去跟從嗰啲惡霸喎，我哋要做一啲唔同嘅嘢。
Okay. Let me ask you a question. Do you think it's neat to be a bully?
你覺得成為一個惡霸去蝦人哋係咪好威咧？
Is that good to be a bully?
係咪好叻咧？可以做到惡霸啦。
Okay, now wait a minute. I didn't hear any answers there. How many of you want to be bullies?
有邊個咧想去做蝦人嗰個？
Okay. Is it neat to be a bully?
能夠去做一個惡霸咧，係咪件好威好叻嘅事咧？
Let me ask you a question. Okay, now this is only for the children. The adults cannot listen to this question. Okay, adults plug your ears. Kids, do you ever try to bully your parents?
小朋友，你有冇試過蝦你嘅爸爸媽媽？
Okay, now, kids. Okay, kids, listen. Kids, now you plug your ears. Parents, do you ever try to bully your kids?
咁啊，父母，你有冇試過蝦你啲仔女啊？
Now, remember, kids, you're the kid, they're the parents. They have rights that you don't have.
嗱，父母咧就有權力咧去管教仔女嘅，仔女咧就冇權咧去蝦父母嘅。
So Ian, someday when you're a parent, does that mean that you don't have any rights, only your kids have rights? When you're a parent and you have your kids?
Can I put the chicken in?
Okay. Okay. See, we need to think about these ways in terms of who God is and the role that God gives us.
我哋一定咧要，無論係我哋係咩身份啦，我哋係仔女啦，到我哋長大咗，我哋做咗父母啦，我哋一定要清楚咧， 上帝係邊一位喎？我哋要知道上帝係喺度嘅喎。
You
我哋
know
要清楚
what?
自己個角色應該係點做嘅。
You know what I'm sorry about?
你知唔知我阿 Ken 好抱歉一樣咩咧？
When I was a kid and I saw somebody being bullied, you know what I did?
阿 Ken 細個嘅時候見到有人俾人蝦啦，佢做咗啲咩咧？
I didn't help the bully.
就冇去
I did not help the bully,
係啊，冇去幫手蝦人啦，
but I did not help the victim either.
亦都冇去幫
I just kind of
嗰個俾人蝦嘅人出
Passively
頭喎。
watched, and I didn't become involved.
咁啊，只係咧做一個旁觀者。
If somebody in your friends is being a bully, you know how you can win in that situation?
如果你
Tell the teacher, that might be a way.
如果你見到有人俾人蝦啦，
Pray.
可以咧去話俾老師聽啦，可以去祈禱啦。
All the rest of
To
you.
the police.
You know what you need to do? You need to help each other.
你應該咧就係去互相幫助啦。
If there's one bully and 5 of you, the 5 of you can help each other.
譬如如果咧有一個惡霸，但係你就同其他同學咧就互相幫助，有5個人，即係5個人對1個人啦，變成
Okay. So what does God want us to do? What does
上
God want
帝
us to
想
do?
我哋點做咧？
That's the question.
我哋要記住咧，我哋要諗下上帝想我哋點樣做咯。
Jesus gave himself for us. Are we willing to give ourselves for others?
耶穌咧願意為我哋咧去犧牲自己啦，我哋都係要為其他人去犧牲自己。
As Janet comes back at this time, we're going to go into our communion time.
咁咧，我哋會嚟到聖餐嘅時間啦 ，Janet 會帶我哋唱歌。
It's time to remember what Jesus did for us.
咁咧，聖餐係一個咩時間啊？係紀念咧耶穌為我哋所做嘅嘢。
I don't know that there. I don't know. I don't. Sorry. Yeah. After. I think after. Okay. So, was there a dance prepared for the dance? Vicky, you do. Did you have a schedule for when? Can we do that after the?
Yes, the song leader will arrange.
Okay. So, let's go ahead and go into our communion time. And in our communion time, it's time to remember what Jesus did for us.
聖餐咧就係紀念到咧耶穌為我哋所做嘅一切。